So today we have a special treat. It's just me. I'm the only one interviewing Lauren Clark, who is a brilliant freelance journalist and content writer based here in Lisbon. This is why I know her. She is fabulous. She also writes a Substack called Well Actually, which has been named a Substack Featured Publication in 2023. She previously was the acting commissioning editor for Women's Health magazine in the UK. She specializes in health and wellness content, though she's covered all aspects of lifestyle, including beauty and travel. She is a delight. We talk about trends from 2023 and a forecast for what's coming up in health and wellness in 2024. We talk about ozempic and caffeine and sleep and really the mind-body connection. It's a great conversation. So you're welcome. Lauren, welcome.
Thank you. That was so nice to start off with lots of deep breaths. I think breathing is so important for calming and just getting in a lovely headspace.
Yeah, I always feel like it's such a funny thing, especially not being in the same space, to be like, hey, let's have a conversation, go. Where if I'm sure you could speak to how important breath is for like the nervous system and all of that as well. But I think it's a nice way to connect in the beginning.
Yeah. And sometimes I find that I forget, I'm like doing something and I forget to breathe. I'm like, oh my God, I've been holding my breath this whole time. No wonder I'm not thinking straight. Or like during workouts, I'll be kind of not breathing during, abdominal work and then wonder why I'm like gasping for air and, can't do it properly. So yeah.
No, totally. Or, it's a big thing. When people eat, sometimes there's like a disconnection from the body, or like you talk about women who wear clothes that are really tight. You're like eating to different points of fullness because you're not breathing enough because you can't even get there. So yeah, breath. Did you actually read that book, that James Nestor book called Breath that came out a couple years ago?
No, I haven't yet. I haven't. It's on my reading list.
It's a good one. Anyway, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I've been very much looking forward to this because I've been following your Substack for a while, and, I follow you on Instagram, so I see a lot of your articles, and I really just love how you approach health and wellness, and, you have sometimes a great sense of humor about things, and I think that's so important in this space.
Oh, no, thank you. And I think I'm glad you picked up on the kind of sense of humor bit of it, because I think sometimes with health and wellness, it can feel like this very pretentious space and kind of very inaccessible and a bit daunting to people. And I think at the end of the day, it's quite simple what is very beneficial for people. We've spoken about this before, meditation, sleep, things are quite, it's not as complicated as I think people believe and, might think at first. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I come from I used to be an actress. I come from a comedy background. So I always joke that I'm like wellness with a side of dick jokes, where, you know what I mean?
Yes,
where it's like,
yes.
you can't take any of this stuff too seriously, and having fun and laughing is more important, or as important as anything else.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we get too far into things, I always love to know how people got where they are. So you kind of have one of those glamorous dream jobs, or at least, from afar, that's what it looks like, right? Like you're in all of these great magazines, you get to interview celebrities and travel and do all these cool things. How did you become a health and wellness journalist?
Oh, well, thank you so much. I mean, so I always wanted to be a journalist since my, early teens. I would read my dad's Times and Telegraph after school every day. I was very nerdy in that respect, but I loved kind of current affairs and reading celebrity profiles and, really hard-hitting long read lifestyle features and things like that. So I knew I loved writing and reading and just people. I find just talking to people very interesting. And I know that you feel the same way. I know you love talking to people, and it's just such a joy, isn't it? Asking questions and kind of being nosy. You're allowed to be nosy about things, which I think is brilliant. But in terms of health and wellness, so that was quite, as for that being my focus, that was quite an accident, because I'd grown up with a mum who is a doctor, and she was a family planning doctor. So we'd talk about kind of, women's health issues when I was younger, like contraception. Like I was always very embarrassed at first. I was like, oh, why are we talking about sexual health and things like that, And yeah, but obviously, you know, it was super useful. I could ask all sorts of questions when I was younger to her, and that was really brilliant. Um, and and then, you know, sort of at the time when I got my first job at Women's Health magazine, that was my first ever job. You know, that's kind of how I got catapulted into the whole kind of health and wellness journalism. It was when the industry was starting to become more and more popular. It's very trendy to kind of go to those 6 a.m. Barry's Bootcamp HIIT classes and, you know,
Right.
do clean eating and things. So it was kind of, you know, the movement was already sort of getting off the ground. I mean, in London, at least, I know in you know, the States, it probably was a bit before that. But yes, it's a very exciting time. And then kind of coupled with this, I had a sort of kind of upbringing where my mum wasn't very well. So she has chronic fatigue syndrome, which is often abbreviated CFS/ME or myalgic encephalomyelitis. And I realized at that point, first of all, you know, just how much women's health issues have kind of have been neglected, you know, and historically with research, but also, you know, the kind of medical system can be a bit misogynistic, and I sort of saw that. And also, so it's the kind of gendered aspect of it all, but also how modern medicine, you know, it is amazing. I've just been writing a piece. You said my career is glamorous. I was, you know, makeup free, like greasy hair yesterday, trying to finish off a piece about egg freezing. And, you know, modern medicine can help us, you know, have babies in our 40s now. You know, it's amazing what it can do, and it can save our life if we're in a car crash. But it can't, there are so many things that it can't do. And for my mum, you know, mainstream medicine, like conventional medicine, you know, it couldn't help her because it didn't have any answers. It didn't know what was wrong with her. It didn't know, you know, what to do, basically, what investigations or tests or, you know, all those kind of things. So I then, you know, got very interested in this other kind of side of health and wellness, you know, sort of more, you know, as it were, like alternative health and wellness and mind-body connection. And we've spoken a bit about this before. And so all these strands kind of coincided to me really, like, you know, developing a passion for health and wellness in my first job. And then I've sort of continued ever since, with a little bit of a kind of, you know, dabbling a bit in showbiz journalism and other things. But sort of, then kind of coming full circle and, you know, being in a space now where I write mostly about women's health issues, with, you know, nutrition, fitness, mental well-being, sleep, lots of other things thrown in. And also, I think the kind of showbiz journalism that I did, it sort of has come around full circle as well. Because I was thinking earlier, you know, we look to celebrities a lot for our kind of health and wellness trends. You know, at the end of the day, you know, we can, you know, I don't really care who Taylor Swift is dating, really, although that is kind of interesting. but it's, you know, it's sort of, you know, the kind of, we look up to them as, you know, Dakota Johnson, I saw the other day, had said that she gets 14 hours of sleep a night, which I think is amazing.
How would you? I couldn't sleep that long. Like, maybe if I had been on a bender.
Like, exactly.
Consistently.
You wake up feeling just like so zen, wouldn't you? But then this has obviously sparked loads of discussion, and I think it's interesting, the worlds of celebrity and health and wellness colliding. Anyway, that was a very waffly answer to your question.
No, it was brilliant. That's why we asked. We like to know the ins and outs. So what made you go freelance?
So I'd moved to Portugal by this point, to Lisbon.
And did you, what was the impetus for that? So
I'd been in London for 9 years, and I think it definitely wasn't I didn't like London anymore. I think I was just desperate for kind of like a change of scene, and just sort of, I wanted to kind of live abroad for a year and see what it would be like. But actually, I think deep down, I was probably a bit burnt out, and I just, you know, same as I'm sure you found in New York, you know, you can be on this kind of hamster wheel and time is passing, and, you know, you sort of don't have chance to kind of stop and breathe. And my work-life balance is definitely not perfect. Even in Lisbon, I still struggle to kind of make sure I have enough downtime and things like that. But it's so much easier to try and put good habits in place in this city, I find. And that's why I've ended up staying for 3 years rather than just the 1 year as originally planned, because, you know, you can go for a lovely walk, breathe, you know, the fresh air in nature very easily, go to a yoga class, you know, I know London has all those things as well. It's just harder to access because it's just massive. Whereas, you know, it's a bit smaller here. And the sense of community actually here, because we sort of live in a bit of a bubble and you bump into people all the time, which is so lovely. And I just love that kind of, community feel and everything. So yeah, it was kind of, just wanting to be away for a year, but then I've seen the benefits in myself being here, and I like the Lisbon version of myself.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So, yeah.
I'm still figuring out what my Lisbon version is, but I think it needs to involve less wine than it did last summer. Although a little bit.
Oh, you're so like close into your Lisbon journey. Like it's been like less than a year, and I think it took me at least a year and a half to feel fully settled, and we're still coming out of COVID in a way. And I know it's quite easy to forget that ever happened, because I think everyone's sort of locked it from them, like exactly. But it's just kind of, we're still getting used to life again, like post that time. The wine is like the anxiety I get, like it definitely started as soon as I hit 30. It's like the anxiety is crazy.
Oh, it's so crazy. And especially wine more than tequila. And those are like the only things I can really play around with anyway at this point. But wine, and there's so much nice wine here, but wine makes it way worse. Yes, I agree. Yeah. I get like sad. It makes me sad the next day.
Yes. And you don't want to be sad in Lisbon when the weather is this beautiful, even in December. Blue skies.
I know.
You know, want to appreciate it all.
I know, I bet you do. I mean, I did 2 winters in the UK, only one in London, and then 14 in New York. And this is so much better. So much nicer.
Yeah. No, like, I think as well, I mean, sometimes people say, oh, there isn't as much of that festive feeling because it doesn't get super kind of like freezing cold. There isn't the snow, you know, and especially in New York, like you have all the beautiful Christmas lights, and it's not quite the same here. But no, I'm much more of a Lisbon baby, I think.
No, I definitely. And it is interesting too, because still you have like what you'd have in major cities, but it is that energy, like New York especially, and I know parts of London have it, where it just sort of sweeps you up in it, right? Where everyone's just going a million miles an hour and you kind of can't help it. And here it's the opposite, which I really like, which again, you sort of have to find your footing again, because it's easy to come here and feel like you've retired or like you're on vacation all the time.
Oh my God, I love that description of it. It's so true. And I think also as well is like what you were saying just now about energy. Yeah. And the people who kind of are drawn to Lisbon who come here, like often we're on our own, we're coming on our own. And and often we're sort of we're excited about trying this new place on for size and meeting new people and kind of trying new things. And I think that's such wonderful energy, and that's very attractive, and why I think people do end up staying for a while, because it's just this kind of like addictive energy in a way.
It is. And if you look at like the blue zones or like the rules for longevity, right? You know, you do have the nice food, you have the good weather, there's the access to nature, but community is such a big part of it. And I've never moved anywhere where people felt so inclusive. And you'd go to dinner with a group of people, and like everyone kind of wants to exchange information, and you know, you see them again, and everyone's really friendly. It's so lovely. It's obviously one of my favorite things about this place as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So, okay, going back to this year, or I would even, you know, the last couple of years, the one thing when I was looking through all of your work that I think is really admirable, and I sort of was forced to do the same thing on my own healing journey in a different way, but you try a lot of stuff on your own and you write about it. And I was particularly impressed with even like Ozempic and that journey. So I would be curious to you just speak to, you know, that experience, or if there's anything specifically that you did this year that was really eye-opening for your, you know, experience of health or your routine or whatever.
Yeah. So this year, the one thing that I tried and then wrote about, did I write about coffee this year? God, I'm so sorry. Because the thing is,
I think so. Was that this year? I was reading the adaptogen thing. That was this year, I think, wasn't it?
or was it teleological? I get so confused because we often work really far in advance with the when I do print pieces, like it'll be months in advance that it'll come out in the
Right.
magazine. So I think I wrote that at the tail end of last year, and I mean, often it will be things that I am interested in anyway. Then I'll see it's a bit of a trend, then I'll try it out. And I mean, I went vegan for a month a few years ago.
And what was that like for you?
I loved it. Once I got past the
Really?
digestive situation,
Yeah.
because the sudden change of diet was a bit of a weird one for my body probably to get used to. But no,
Yeah.
it was amazing. And I another time I used a goal planner for I think a month and saw how that changed things. I also was lucky enough to work out at an £18,000 a year gym in London, which was very nice.
I'm
Um,
sure. I'm sure.
yes, I was like slightly out of my gym budget, but yeah, no, that was lovely. And yeah, it's like, and I think it makes it so much more straightforward to write about, obviously, because you're trying things yourself.
Mhm.
And then I think the reader resonates more with that. But with Ozempic, that was actually completely by accident because so I've been reading about it,
Mhm.
and sort of I know in the States it's been obviously a bit of a bigger topic, sorry, compared to the UK,
Mhm.
and or it sorry rather it took the UK a bit longer to kind of like wake up to it basically, but that was a friend basically had tried it, and I was like, oh my god, I've been reading about this thing, like what's it like? And he was like, well, do you want to try some? And I was like, oh, this in the name of journalism, yes I will. And it was horrendous. So I was just like,
What was
I
your
just
personal experience?
so what you're meant to do is obviously work with a doctor or a licensed practitioner or a
Yes,
medical
yes.
professional, and you're meant to kind of ease up the dosage of because so the compound's called semaglutide and the brand
Yeah.
names are Ozempic, Wegovy, etc. But I went straight in with quite a high dose, so my body
Ooh.
was like, oh my god, and I felt all the symptoms that you're meant to well, not meant to feel, but that you often feel when you take it, but in a really big dose. So I felt really nauseous. I was like, sorry, it's a bit too much information, throwing up all day. It was just horrible. So, and my appetite was very different, like very low for an entire week because I'd had
Hmm.
this like big wham of,
Right, right.
of the medication basically. And I think like my lesson from that experience was, definitely just don't take things for the without sort of doing it properly and everything. But it's very powerful, and it's I sort of, and it's really interesting that we're having this conversation now about wellness trends for
Hmm.
next year, because I think this year has been very much defined by not just Ozempic, but sort of like we're at a transitional time with health and wellness, where we've been spending a lot of time kind of thinking about it in a holistic way, sort of thinking, you know, like healthy habits, the progress might be slow, but at the end of the day, it's sustainable and,
Hmm.
long lasting, ultimately. But when you bring in things like a Zempic and this idea that, oh, you can have a quick fix to your,
Hmm.
you know, really, and then it sort of, it scares me in a way. So I'm thinking, we've done all this great work with building a healthy relationship with food. Often a lot of women have. And I,
Yeah.
I just I just really hope it isn't the start of a kind of wave of people having a really tricky relationship with food again, and the sort of the heroin chic of the 90s coming back and things like that. So I think it's
Right.
quite a scary time actually, and that's kind of been starting a lot this year. And I really hope it doesn't end up in the same way for a whole new generation of young girls as well, because I don't know how you feel, but growing up in the sort of in that era where size zero was talked about as this amazing thing, and the kind of in the tabloids in the UK, sort of if a celebrity had put on a little bit of weight, there'd be like a red circle around their
Yeah.
body, and that kind of feeling that as a woman, like you had to be perfect or else. And it was really nice having a whole kind of 10 years where it was, you know body diversity was a bit more celebrated, and it scares me that we might be going backwards. Sorry, I've just waffled on.
No, oh my God. No. That's why you're here. That's the point.
I'm so used to
No,
being like in the opposite seat that I'm just talking too much.
no, no such thing. You're so British and polite. No, I couldn't agree more. It was really scary to hear like the heroin chic. I mean, my mom is a model. She's naturally tall and thin.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
um, I watched her, dislike certain parts of her body. So I grew
Oh,
up disliking the same. And then when I went to college and, got stressed out and gained the freshman 15 and all of the things happened, I was bulimic. So I had a pretty severe eating disorder for the first half of my 20s, which is, one of many reasons that led me into this space. But I was actually talking to a friend the other day about this she ended up in recovery for her eating disorder. And it's like a prison. And like, if there's
mm,
anything that I like feel most strongly about being in this space is helping women, especially, but no men, men struggle from this stuff too, is getting people the right information so they feel empowered in their body at any size. Because it's so much about how we feel, but when we go like these huge trends where it's like your body needs to look like this, all of a sudden you're going outside of your experience and you're self objectifying your body
yeah.
all the time. So you're not present and you're just staring and judging your legs, your butt, or whatever it is you don't like about yourself, right? And so much of the work I've been doing and dedicated my career to is teaching people how to live in their experience, right? And bring all those tools. And we talk about like meditation and,
Mm,
breathing and eating well and sleeping. So you can actually just be present and enjoy this one body that we have. But to
yeah.
go back and no, it was very scary because I saw not only the Ozempic thing was huge. I mean, it still is. And I saw
Mm,
like health practitioners I know who help people lose weight go on it and lose weight. And like
yeah.
that, and of course, like I support anyone doing things that makes them feel good. And I think for some people it has been an improvement because of what it does to blood sugar. But it
Mm,
is scary to watch a whole bunch of people just reach for. But I guess humans are like that, right?
yeah.
By nature, where it's like it'd be much easier to do the quick thing. And if all of a sudden I've disliked my body and how it looked for so long and I could just press a button, I'm going to press a button. But the effects of it, long term, it's just putting a band-aid on a leak in the boat.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. And also, when I was speaking to some doctors earlier this year when I was writing about it, is the studies have only been done on kind of taking it for 2 years. So there's not much research on what happens after that.
Yeah.
And, there's sort of been reports of, weight gain that's higher after that because you can't really. I think they're saying that it's not ideal to be on it forever. So unless you're on it
Yeah.
forever, your appetite's going to go back to the baseline, but then you might have lost that ability to sort of know about your hunger cues in a natural way. And I think
Right.
it's Remy Bader, if I'm saying her name correctly, has she's spoken about having been on it and then gained more weight afterwards, and
Yeah.
kind of is sort of warning people against that aspect of it. So yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard, and I guess for those who are recovering from an eating disorder as well, it's you're sort of, it's a lifelong probably pursuit of maintaining that recovery and that relationship. And I imagine when things like this pop up and the conversations pop up like this, as they do, it can be very triggering. And you know the whole kind of discussion around January weight loss and things like that, it's all
Yeah.
going to kind of get going again. And it's just, yeah, it's sort of, it's so normalized in our culture to
Mhm.
sort of have these kind of extremes in a way, and restricting, and just instead of just teaching everyone and sort of growing up, school onwards, with a sort of balanced approach, healthy approach, sustainable approach to like nutrition in this instance, and also exercise and things like that.
Yeah. And you touched on this earlier with, seeing your mom's journey and understanding it's
Yeah.
not just one thing, like health is in this bubble. And you need sort of both, right? The behavioral stuff. And I find with most people with that unhealthy relationship to food, it's something deeper. Like with any
Mm,
sort of addiction to anything, whether it's relationships or shopping or sex or, what it is, alcohol,
yeah.
food, so much of it is covering up pain or numbing and
Yeah.
avoiding your life. So then when you see people rush for these quick fixes and they feel really good temporarily, it's scary over here for me to watch, because when this is taken away from you and maybe you rebound, like what's that going to look like when maybe you feel, it's scary. It is scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was the most interesting thing kind of watching my mum's, or still watching my mum's journey, is the thing that has been the most, like, helped her symptoms the most is, interestingly, nutrition and making the right changes to her diet and things, or right, I just say for her, not for everyone. And the nutrition can be so powerful, and I think that's something also to be celebrated. Not what we take out of our diets, it's what we put in can be so wonderful and exciting as well.
And healing. And that's the thing we're not teaching people too, right? It's like, oh, it's just about calories in, calories out. Take this, you won't be hungry, eat whatever you want. Where it's like, that's how I became a health coach. Like, I really reversed so much of my symptoms through food initially, and seeing, as like a highly sensitive person, how much certain foods made my brain cloudy, made me anxious, made me sad, all of those things made me disconnected from myself, and other ways of eating changed my outlook on the world. And you see that sometimes it's the most simple. I just had a new client recently where I do like this 10-day, essentially it's called a detox, but it's not a diet. Like, you're just sort of taking all stimulants out of the diet, and you're just really putting a lot of anti-inflammatory foods, but you can eat as much as you want, that kind of thing. And that alone, it was so funny. Her roommate, who I know, was like, I had no idea. She's like a different person. Her outlook on life, she's like cheerful. And it's true. And it was so funny because she was like, I have all this energy. I feel so good. I feel so optimistic. And I'm like, this is actually who you are, without a bunch of stuff in your body that your body doesn't like. And I think often we don't have that conversation, right? It's like weight or what I look like. It's like, who cares what you look like if your experience is full of anxiety, you don't like yourself, you're upset, you're hungry, and maybe a little bit heavier, but with a lot of energy and feeling really good and positive. Like, that's a way better life experience. And like, getting people on that side, I think, is really more important.
Yeah, exactly. You're so right. And I remember a really brilliant nutritionist in the UK called Lianna said to me once in an interview, most people don't know how good they can feel because they've always spent their entire life feeling probably what they think is fine, but actually is probably very low to mediocre, in terms of energy, irritability, brain fog, all these things. And it's only until you sort of see the other side that you're just like, oh my God. Because I remember when I first started taking, it sounds really nerdy, but when I first started taking magnesium, I think I was in my late teens. And it was something that I think a blood tester highlighted that I could do with more because I wasn't eating enough like leafy green vegetables and things. And I felt amazing after taking it every single night. I noticed if I don't take it now, I just sleep terribly. And then that knocks on, has a knock-on effect, because if you don't sleep as well, you're not feeling as good during the day, your mood is affected, etc. So I think it's small tweaks can make such a huge difference, for sure.
Yes, I completely agree. Okay, so what have you seen this year? I know you put together a bit of a list. What are your sort of top trends that you saw this year?
Let me get my list up. Okay,
so
I'm an expert journalist. I was like, oh, I'm just going to do my research.
I love it.
But the funny thing is, it's like, I feel I'm not an expert in any particular thing. I just like observe, and I feel unqualified to say anything.
That's so important, right? Like, I think that there are so many people who are, and this is like the nutrition school I went to was really interesting. Was a health coaching school, and they showed you a lot of different styles of eating and a lot of theories around nutrition. And the whole idea was, being on the outside, some things work for some people, some things work for others. There's no one size fits all. And I think something really cool about the position you're in is you get to be on the outside of the industry and observe and talk to experts and have experiences. And I think that's really invaluable.
Yeah, I know. I feel very fortunate because I learn lots of things, and and it's all in there somewhere. And sometimes I hope I can regurgitate, all the kind of, wisdom that I've absorbed over the years. But I'm not as, what's the word, articulate as some people, as you can tell, because I'm struggling to get my words out now. I'm so bad.
Not at all.
So it's been around for a while, since actually the 1950s, I think, or 1940s. But Pilates this year has gone from strength to strength. And, we're seeing, it's kind of had a renaissance. Adele, Hailey Bieber, Margot Robbie are big fans reportedly. And it's been all over Instagram and TikTok. And what I think is great about it, because I think sometimes when, you have sort of health and wellness trends kind of pop up, or you have a lot of, PRs be like, oh, this is going to be a big thing or whatever. Is it sort of like, oh, is this really helping anyone? Is it all kind of, is there any substance to this kind of buzz around a particular product and things like that? But with something like Pilates, which has been around for a long time, and is, having a bit more resurgence now, there is so much brilliant evidence that it is an amazing thing in terms of not spiking our cortisol, but increasing strength. And I think that was something
that's huge.
For like 10 years, we've had the kind of, I love a HIIT workout. Sometimes, it can be brilliant, but when you're having a really stressful day and then you go and do like a Barry's boot camp, and then you come out of it feeling so wired, you then can't sleep. All these sort of HIIT workouts are brilliant when you're feeling, calm in your day or whatever. But then if you throw in other stress, like life stress, and it's sort of a recipe for disaster, and then you wonder why, you're just feeling really anxious all the time and everything. So I think it's really lovely that space is being made in the workout scene for things like Pilates.
I think that's a really beautiful thing you just pointed out too about the cortisol, because especially because so many people, it's sad, right? They look at their health when they either are sick or they feel uncomfortable in their body, they've gained weight, right? And they come to me or people like me and they're like, okay, I don't get it. I'm really stressed, but I'm eating these things. I'm working out really hard. And often people don't realize when their cortisol is super high and they're adding more, their body's going to hold on to weight, right? Or cortisol can affect inflammation. You're making your body more and more inflamed. Then you can get sick, that can lead to, even like anxiety and depression, as well as, weight gain. So I think people just think work out harder, and that is not always the case. So I think that's a really beautiful thing to point out. And that's cool. I think that's really cool. I didn't realize, but everyone likes prescription here. I haven't been yet. Have you been there?
No, I haven't. I've been to the Kind Space, which
that's near me. Yes, I need to go check that out, because they have a bar too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of, and then the thing is, it has been around for a while, but it's sort of all of a sudden, has kind of popped up again as being a really popular thing. So and obviously just hit Lisbon. So, and so obviously the kind of term quiet luxury was something that we heard discussed a lot around the time of Succession coming out earlier this year. And I feel like we're living in the era of quiet wellness. People are kind of going on retreats. I feel like people are doing more kind of like one-to-one work, like what you do with your clients. I think people are doing the work in a more private way than beaming it over Instagram these days. I think, like gone is the era of the kind of avocado toast, green smoothie kind of posts, sort of, obviously people are still sharing, but I think we're doing it in a bit more of a subtle way. And kind of tied into this, I felt, was the kind of, what we discussed earlier about, ozempic and Wegovy and things like that, to kind of, are people being less honest about, how they're getting certain results? But in a sort of, that's a sort of perhaps, different end of the spectrum. But I think we're sort of, we're sort of looking a bit more internally perhaps, and being less performative. I think that's the key word I'm looking for, is not doing something for the sake of everyone else knowing about it, but more sort of thinking about it more internally.
I hope that's the case. Like, I hope that we are starting to, and it's been interesting. I've been in this space for 10 plus years, and my practice and what I've done has grown with me. And in the beginning, it was just me trying to survive, is how I ended up becoming a health coach. And it did have so much to do with nutrition and sleep and movement, which continue to play an important role. But you understand that you go beyond that, and it is your mindset, right? It is your relationship to your nervous system and anxiety, depression, all of those things. And I think it's cool if we're seeing a trend of people realizing, like, yes, we're all eating healthier now, maybe a little bit, or at least mindful of it.
Yeah.
We're all trying to move and sleep, but then like what's underneath that? And gosh, if that's what's going on, I'm very excited.
Yeah, no, I just have, yeah, I'm just sensing we're kind of having a bit more of a bit healthier approach. No, a bit, a bit more healthy an approach. God, you can tell it's like almost like the festive break, can't you? It's like crawling to the end of the
Yes, yes,
year.
yes.
But yeah, and then sort of tied into what we were discussing earlier a little bit about cortisol.
Mhm.
I feel, and I wrote about this a couple of times this year, you know, coffee, I think, has experienced a bit of a backlash this year. I think it's
Mm.
sort of, I wrote a piece recently for Women's Health about how it's kind of like the new alcohol, and people are, you know, not necessarily giving it up, but sort of, rethinking their relationship with it. You know, there are obviously studies that are like coffee can be good for you in the same way that those glass of red wine a day studies, you know, will be like, oh, it's kind of good for you in some situations. But I think coffee, you know, it can trigger anxiety, it can disrupt your
Mhm.
sleep, it can, you know, affect, give you the jitters and things like that. And I think people are realizing, well, I mean, I have a friend who went to a therapist recently, and the therapist, the first question was, are you drinking coffee? Because I would really encourage you to kind of like give up or cut down if you're experiencing anxiety. And I think, you know, it's one of those things that we don't often think about when we sort of
Mhm.
try and, you know, help our mental health and things like that. And in its place, I'm thinking, I'm seeing people are drinking more matcha, which has obviously been around for a little while, mushroom coffee, decaf, and then mushrooms. That kind of space has kind of been building a lot as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's a, yeah, kind of another trend that I've noticed this year.
I know you played around with adaptogens instead of caffeine. Did you go right back to coffee? Did that change your relationship at all?
So it's caused me to cut down. So I try and
Mhm.
stick to one a day, and I'm drinking now a mushroom coffee by a brand called Dirtea. Not sponsored. I just absolutely love them. It comes in very like
Can
stylish
you get it here or do you order it?
I order it. You can get it delivered here. I think
Oh,
there's some
nice.
other brands that kind of operate in Portugal, but yeah, I kind of I sort of smuggle it back with me in my suitcase, or no, not smuggle it. It's completely legal, obviously.
Adaptogens, not
Yeah, exactly,
psilocybin.
exactly. But yeah, no, it's amazing, and I've noticed a huge difference. Although I'm sure you find this, that like the coffee culture is such a big thing in Portugal, and it's so
Yes.
easy, you know, after dinner having like an espresso. It feels very like glamorous and Mediterranean and stuff. I have to kind of be careful about those
I
type of
do
things.
too. Oh, I'm very sensitive. I mostly only drink decaf, which they say isn't the best for you either. But I get a buzz off decaf.
That's
And
amazing. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, I'm that sensitive where
Wow.
there are times in my life where I will drink coffee, but it makes I run very anxious, so it makes me totally like
Yeah.
I am totally
Yeah.
nuts. So even decaf is a lot, but I love it, and there is a lot of really good coffee here. And of course, like I feel like once a week someone's like, meet for a coffee. That's all I feel like I do half the
Yeah.
time when I'm not working is meet someone for a coffee.
Yeah. No, exactly. And if you're trying to kind of be a bit more sober, meeting for a coffee feels like the better option.
Yeah.
But actually, yeah, it might not be. Maybe going for
Right.
like a walk, or, you know, but like sorry, I forgot to mention earlier, when I put a call out on Instagram to ask people if they could talk to me about their relationship with coffee, I have never received so many messages about opinions.
Really?
It was actually
Really?
insane. Yeah, I was like, oh wow, this has really like struck a chord. And you know, a lot of people who were going back to kind of the previous quiet wellness trend, a lot of people I think have just been doing it in a really like quiet way, like, oh, just giving up coffee, you know.
Mhm.
um and actually, yeah, kind of people reestablishing their relationship with alcohol is often a kind of private thing as well. Like people
Yeah.
aren't being as kind of, because I think, you know, there can be sort of judgment that people can feel and things. So I think it's funny with certain things that are sort of very normalized by society, and you often don't want to have to explain yourself all the time when you're kind of not having as much coffee or not having as much alcohol and things like that.
Yeah. It is hard. I think, especially like London or New York is such a drinking culture
Yeah.
that you almost had to get defensive or there would be periods of time where I'd stop drinking and I would pretend I was, just because it was easier to pretend I was drinking. I was like, can you just make it look like a vodka soda or something? So you didn't have to explain to 50 people who'd be like, what? Especially like in your 20s and early 30s, like, why are you doing it? Where it is, and during the pandemic, I had so many people come to me, talking about the stress of all of it had made them start drinking more. And I think I'm still seeing the after effects of what the pandemic did for people's alcohol consumption, and them still trying to get, reduce it or establish a better relationship with it, because I think so many people were coping.
Wow. And do you think that in using that as a coping, like when somebody turns to something that's a coping mechanism, do you then feel like it's even harder to kind of shake that off or rebuild a healthy relationship with that coping mechanism because you're so reliant on it as a crutch? Like, is that what you found?
Well, it's the thing is, it's how sick of it someone is, right? How willing to change someone is. And really, it isn't that hard if you give them a tool that they can use to substitute. And once you cultivate the awareness, and this is the biggest piece around, like, drinking actually makes me feel worse and doesn't make me feel better, or eating the whole cake, or endlessly scrolling, or being in 55, always on the apps or in a bunch of relationships that are surface, right? All of this is just a quick fix to avoid some deeper pain or something that I haven't processed. Once you show people that that's not working, they're smart enough, everyone is, to start to have this moment of like, oh, I'm still going to have the wine and know that it's not working, and I'm going to have more and it's going to give me a hangover or whatever it is. And then you pair that with something new, you plant the seed in their brain, and there's something in the back of their head that's going to be like, don't do the thing, go to bed instead. And it may take, and this is why I have a job, but it may take people like years to fully get there. But like we were saying before, those small incremental changes, what they'll start to see, oh, wow, there's this better way, and I actually feel better. And it goes from, that knee-jerk reaction to needing to feel better in the moment, like, how do I immediately get rid of this pain or this discomfort, to understanding like, okay, if I actually make this other choice, or eat the vegetable, or go to therapy, or meditate, or breathe, or whatever it is, I'm going to have a long-term better impact. And then that starts to raise my baseline. Because like you were saying earlier, and this is what I see a lot, like, you don't realize it. Like, as a kid, if you're lucky, your baseline of health is like pretty high. And then as you get older and you have stress in, relationships, job stuff, caffeine, alcohol, you're eating too much, you know what I mean? All of a sudden you get to your mid-20s, your mid-30s, and you're kind of feeling like crap all the time. You don't know it. And a lot of people will come to me and will really do a few things to overhaul their diet, and they have no idea they can feel that good. And it's the same thing where it's like, once you give someone a tool and they realize that like they can actually face their grief, or, they can change their relationship to their anxiety, doing this other thing that serves them, and actually avoid having more of it, they'll do it forever. But it's just getting over that hump of them being ready to change, and then being able to cultivate the awareness around like, this isn't working and this other thing is, and then just being willing to show up. And it's almost like reps at a gym, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm going to keep trying because I see the light at the end of the tunnel, like it's brighter and brighter. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't want to drink at home by myself anymore. That makes me feel like shit.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And what I think so interesting as well is I think a lot of people think it's going to be very, very difficult, very expensive to kind of get out of a pattern. And I'm not saying it's easy to do so, but there are sort of, tools to kind of, that are free, that are, like movement, getting some sunlight, going for a walk, getting some sunlight, like
sleep,
breaking
meditation can be free. Yeah. Journaling. Yep.
Yeah. And I think the health and wellness industry kind of, obviously it's an industry, it makes money in its own way, but I think that sometimes the messaging can be that you've got to throw a lot of money at a situation before you feel better, and it's not always the case. However, what I would say is, in the case of what the work you do, or therapy, like often you do need a helping hand and someone to guide you through that process for a period of time.
Yeah.
And I think that's so invaluable as well, yeah.
And that's so much why I wanted to do this podcast, because I think what I realized, and oh, wow, this almost makes me emotional. Like when I was as sick as I was, the things that made me feel so much better were essentially just understanding nutrition differently, managing stress, taking stimulants out of my body, sleeping more, right? Moving in different ways. And it was stuff that was so simple and, not free. Food's not free, but you know what I mean? You're eating anyway. And I felt I got to this point in my mid-20s where I was so sick, anxious, depressed, panic attacks, hated my body, so mean to myself, fatigue, hormonal issue, like you name it. I had all the things that women struggle with, right? And it just blew my mind that I was able to reverse that with a little bit of information. And it, for me, I just feel like everyone has a right to this information, and everyone has a right to feel better in their body. And it's unfair that it's gotten so confusing at this point, right? Do this diet. No, try this medicine. No, you need this. No, you need these. Eat gluten. Don't eat gluten. Do this. Don't do that. No, there are certain things, like you said, that are so simple. And really the thing is coming back to that personal empowerment and knowing that like you're the only expert, right? So like I love, and that comes back to like, I love how you talk about you trying things and your experience. And I think even in writing that way, you spark some curiosity. Oh, I wonder what would happen if I did that, right? Because this is what's happening for her, and she's writing about it in her first person experience, not saying everyone should do this. I wonder what would happen if I drank less or I slept more. And like I couldn't agree more, because it doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to be inaccessible. And the most impactful things you can do are free.
Yeah. No, completely agree. Yeah. No, definitely. And that's why actually it weaves really well into I can't speak. What's wrong with me? This is why I've never done a podcast before. I can't talk. I lose the ability to speak English.
Is so charming. Lauren, you're so charming. And there's so many Americans that listen to my podcast who are going to love you just because of your accent. So it doesn't matter what you say.
Oh my God, brilliant. It weaves nicely into the fourth trend from 2023, which is kind of the women's health becoming big business. So I'm thinking like menopause, periods, and I've got some nice little stats about so the menopause market size is projected to be valued at $24.4 billion by 2030, and the menstrual cramps treatment market is projected to be valued at 9,145.12 million by 2030. And obviously it's brilliant that there is kind of increased awareness of period pain. There's this whole kind of like idea of menstrual leave and things like that, and also menopause. Women going through the menopause have suffered in silence for so long, and often when like employers haven't often been the most sympathetic. They've often been raising kids at the same time, and struggling with their marriages. Like divorce rates are very high in menopausal aged women, and also actually suicide rates are like, in the UK at least, it's one of the age groups for women where the suicide rate is highest, which is obviously heartbreaking. And so obviously it's brilliant that we are talking about it more, but then obviously there's companies perhaps are jumping on the bandwagon a little bit, and obviously some products are incredible, some services are incredible that are coming out, but some perhaps might not be so much. Anyway, it's not for me to say because I'm not of menopausal age yet, but with things like periods pain, which I think is a really interesting kind of area, and I think it's brilliant that we are having more more solutions. I don't know whether you've tried any yet, but I've tried the kind of these like eucalyptus cooling patches that kind of go on your,
that sounds great,
on your tummy, and as a device that kind of sends like pulses that are sort of meant to kind of mask the pain, and it doesn't completely get rid of my period pain, and obviously there are other symptoms that come with your time of the month and things like that. But yeah, it's kind of early days, but I just hope that women are being sold products that actually help them. And I think one of the problems with period pain in particular is we like science doesn't actually know the exact reason why we experience it. And if there isn't enough research into the cause of something or why we're experiencing something, then they can't find a solution, And so, and it is, one of my favorite stats is the fact that there are 4 times as many studies into erectile dysfunction as period pain. And so I think, it's all very well there being more interest in this area, but we need to have products and solutions that actually work and things like that. So yeah, but it's not for me to kind of, be like, I think it's,
no, it sounds like, a double-edged sword, right? It's good because all of a sudden we're focusing on it. So it's sad, but true. There probably is more research going into it to see how people can make money, but at least there's more research going into it, right?
Exactly.
So and again, I think it goes back to us and being really discerning about like, it's good, try things, but don't spend too much money and a hot water bottle and a nap are just great too.
Exactly. And and just compassion from like your employer. Like if you're feeling terrible one week, could they extend that deadline? Or, can your, partner be more, pick up the slack or something, So I think it's, it's obviously mixed depending on people's circumstances, but it's an interesting.
Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Oh my God, the stat about erectile dysfunction, how infuriating.
I know. It's just, but then again, I think it's like one of these things that, like scientists will study what they know, and science has been traditionally very male dominated. And I think, and obviously these things are all kind of leveling out. And in the UK, at least, more of the doctors who are graduating, it's majority women now. And obviously it'll take a while to kind of perhaps, catch up and sort of even out and things like that. And when I remember my mum saying, because she was working before she got ill, she was working until her early 40s. And it was always men who were the consultants who were in higher positions in the NHS. And that in and of itself will sort of create a culture of perhaps not listening to women as much and things like that. So it's interesting.
Hopefully that's changing.
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. Fingers crossed. And sorry, and then I feel like I'm waffling on about these trends, but and then the fifth one for 2023, I felt like was kind of ultra personalized nutrition. And I don't know if you've heard more discussion about kind of glucose monitoring and those Zoe.
I did it this summer. I did an Abbott. Yeah, I did a free Libre for 2 weeks. And
how did you find it?
It was really interesting. It's funny. I think it's useful and it's sort of fun, right? To be like, ooh, what's going to happen? I went to a wedding during the time. And it was funny. Eddie and I did them together. He brought them. And it was really interesting because we were watching whose blood sugar did what. And mine was pretty low, but it was actually interesting for me because I realized I've tended to eat very low carb ever since I got sick because I was eating a more anti-inflammatory diet. And over the years, it's crept up a little bit more. And I've always been very mindful of it. But I realized I actually can get away with more carbs than I thought. And it sort of balances my mood a little bit. And I was like, oh, and it kind of gave me permission where in the past, I think I was like, oh, well, we don't want to, it's not as healthy. And I was like, oh, if I add, more sweet potato or even like some gluten-free bread or something like that, like rice, a bit here and there in my day, my mood is a little bit different. And so I think it's, nothing was shocking, right? Where it was like, okay, I ate this, it's going to take, but it was interesting to see how long after things spiked. And then really looking at, and because I work in this space, of course, I asked myself a lot of different questions. So I really was paying attention to how I felt afterwards. But I really looked at especially mood focus, because I'm always really fascinated by the mind-body connection. So how is what I'm putting in my body affecting my output and my, experience of life? And that was interesting. I was like, oh, I need to eat more carbs than I thought to be a little bit happier, which I guess makes sense, but I didn't, you know what I mean? Of course, carbs make us happy, but it was interesting in terms of energy and mood. But I would recommend it. They're not that expensive and they can be kind of fun. It did it was a little uncomfortable, but it's funny. You're seeing them everywhere. It was an interesting science experiment for my body.
Yeah. Was there one particular food that you were like, oh my God, I was not expecting to have that response?
No.
So
No, I mean, I know
everything
too
was,
much about
yeah,
and like understanding that, I mean, I think a lot of people get surprised that simple carbohydrates alone will spike things as much as like sugar. Like sometimes like certain bread
wow.
can as much as like a dessert. I think people get surprised by that.
Yeah.
But no, I think if anything, I was expecting things to be, I was most surprised with how low I was fasting almost too long because I'm not a breakfast person. So it was interesting to see that I was like, oh, maybe if I eat a little earlier, I might feel better. And then also it's interesting to see what coffee does to an
Yes.
empty stomach, right? So that can affect your blood sugar. So just like it affirms stuff I already knew,
Yeah.
and then gave me a little bit more permission. And it is funny though, in terms of like paying attention to like movement before or afterwards and what that does, right? Like it
Yeah.
was just fun to be like, oh, it is true. If I go walking afterwards and I use my body and we use some of this energy that I've eaten, right? What happens
Mm.
then? And you'd see the things spike. And it was interesting to see like during the night sometimes, like what would happen if you look on like a better night's sleep versus a worse night's sleep where your blood sugar was, depending on like what you had the night before, if you're drinking alcohol. So it affirmed a lot of things and I learned a little bit, but it was also just kind of fun.
Yeah. Oh, I want to
It's like a
try it
health nerd.
now.
Yeah, you should. You should.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, yeah, no, that's brilliant. I'm definitely, yeah, definitely will give that a go. And then I've got, sorry, I'm just like, I don't know, I don't want to let you
Oh no,
lose your
no,
breath.
we're good. We're good. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, and so I've got the 2024
Yes,
kind of
projections. Yeah.
projections.
I'm so curious as you've been studying the space, like what's on tap for next year?
Yeah. So I know you did a brilliant podcast recently about sleep, and I think
Mm-hmm.
sleep is going to become really, really, really prominent next year. I think so. When I first started writing about health and wellness in 2014 ish, mental well-being wasn't even like particularly on people's radar in the UK at
Wow.
least. Um,
Yeah.
it was all about diet and exercise, which I guess now we talk about as like nutrition and movement and things like that. And then
Yeah.
obviously mental well-being is now a whole other pillar. And I think we're going to see the same with sleep. It's going to become the
Hmm.
fourth big pillar. And I think still people don't, give it as much kind of weight and attention as they should. And it's
Hmm.
the key to everything. It's the key to like glowing skin, amazing
Yes.
energy, appetite regulation,
Yep.
everything. So I
Mood, all
think
of it.
mood, exactly. And I also think, I mean, just kind of going back to the what we were talking earlier about Dakota Johnson and her 14 hours of sleep. I think, sleep is such a luxury because at the end of the day, I mean, I was reading Oprah Winfrey doesn't set an alarm clock. She just wakes up naturally every single day. And I just think, oh my God, it's a luxury. It's amazing. And I think it is going to become one of these things that's like, you know, the epitome of like, you know, wellness, kind of just getting enough sleep. And anyway, but also I think, like I was
I
also
guess what?
reading,
I am Oprah. I have not set an alarm
oh,
in years unless I have
it's
to go to
amazing.
the airport.
But I think that's so good because what that alarm clock's doing is probably, unless it knows exactly when you're in the right point of sleep, like I have one of those like wake up lamps, which is amazing. But you know, a normal alarm clock like on your iPhone is just like stressing your body out. You're starting the
Hmm.
day feeling like, oh, who am I?
Right.
Where am I? Cortisol spike. It's horrible often, and I think, yeah, that I mean, that I think that's brilliant that you, yeah, you don't have an
Well,
alarm clock.
it started, well, because mostly, I mean, being an actor, I mean, obviously once in a while, but
Yeah.
when I had adrenal fatigue, when I was really sick, they were like
Mm.
literally sleep as much as possible. And if you can sleep until you naturally wake up, and then I mean, having like any sort of fatigue issues in your 20s is so disheartening because you're watching everyone
Yeah.
else run around and you're like, why do I feel like a grandma? And after that, it was such a protected thing for me because I knew what it was like not to have energy. But yeah, that's
Mm.
like I try to build my life around that as much as possible. I mean, it's funny. I moved to Portugal and like had too much fun this summer. So I'm like, I was like, oh, remember when you used to like be really good about all these things? But we're
Oh,
getting back. We're getting back.
Yes, exactly. One thing at a time. You're settling in still. And sort of side note to kind of that is, I think, there'll be a increased growth of kind of like the sleep tech market. And when I say
Yeah.
that, I mean things like Mark Zuckerberg's £2,000 mattress that perfectly temperature regulates and like heats and cools,
Mm.
just things like that. I think, just going to be, yeah, it's just going to explode in a good way. I think it's a
Mhm.
positive thing that we're focusing more on sleep, is my prediction anyway. I'm going to imagine in 12 months time and I've just like got everything wrong. Like an old test. And then another thing, I know you mentioned earlier about blue zones, and
Mhm.
I was reading about this idea of low key longevity. So
Mm.
kind of being a bit of an antidote to biohacking, which is brilliant, but can be feel quite inaccessible and a bit
Mhm.
expensive and kind of high tech and things like that. And essentially, low key longevity has the same goal, but it's more about like lifestyle habits of communities in
Yes.
blue zones like Italy and Japan, where people, perhaps focus on more plant-based eating, just like slow movement, strong community ties and sunshine and things like that. So I think we're going to see more of more attention on, more accessible kind of ways to, extend longevity in a more sustainable way. You're not going to have like perhaps the immediate results of kind of cryotherapy, but in the long term, you're going to achieve the same thing. And like we said before, it doesn't cost a lot to kind of just go for a
Yeah.
walk in the sunshine, catch up with a friend. And also this aspect of kind of, lifespan enhancing fitness,
Mhm.
not just the aesthetics of kind of looking toned, but also, lifting weights for your bone health, for muscle growth, so that when you
Right.
fall over, you're not like, breaking your bones, it just kind of future proofing your body, but in a really kind of holistic, healthy way. Um,
I love that.
so yeah, so do you feel like since you moved, I know Portugal's not a blue zone, I don't think, and I don't know what the like average life expectancy is, but do you feel like you sort of kind of started doing a few more of those things since you moved to Portugal, in
Well,
terms of like, yeah.
it was funny because in my head years ago, I was moving to LA for these reasons, and I did right before the pandemic. I did
Oh,
end up moving to LA, and because I was still acting and all the things,
yeah.
and I wanted a slower pace of life. I wanted more sunshine. I wanted more access to nature. I wanted a community that had more awareness around like food and wellness and stuff.
Mm,
And while I did not stay in LA, it was not what I thought. I mean, I knew because I would go back and forth to New York a lot, but after it is a massive city still.
yeah.
Once I ended up leaving the US, actually, even London, I found to be much more friendly. And I was shocked
Oh,
by that. Then both New York and LA, but I don't know. I was there at a weird time too. And I think parts of
yeah.
LA would be fine. And then when I left London, I wasn't sure where I wanted to go. I really had in mind, like, well, what do I want? A slower pace of life. I want like nice weather. I want access to nature and to be able to be fit. And I was really impressed. I sort of ended up accidentally in Portugal, killing time in between like my flat ending in Paris and needing to go to Tuscany for this wedding. And I found that like, um access to nice vegetables was easier here. Like
Yeah.
even like Portuguese food can be very simple but really beautiful
Yeah.
and healthy in terms of like, you're getting a lot of fresh fish, you're getting a lot of veggies, you're getting like
Yeah.
potatoes. Like I found that even in like little markets there was more access to nicer looking produce than in a lot of places. And yeah, that was a huge. And then I accidentally, right, through like one contact, started to meet a lot of people in the wellness industry or who are mindful or who are into meditation. So here it had a lot of, it's like it's got the nature, it's got the nice food, it's got the access to, move your body and sunlight and all
Yeah.
those things. But then also people who are cultivating community around healthier things, which was a real draw for me.
Yes, yeah, no, definitely. I think there's a general level of being quite clued up about various things here, which is really nice. And
Yeah.
yeah, just like appreciating, like not being like, oh, it's really strange you're going to 7:30 a.m. yoga to sort of be like, oh no, that's really cool kind of thing. So
Yeah. Well, and
yeah,
even like, it's funny, people like half my friends here don't drink and we'll still go out and have a
yeah,
good time.
yeah,
And that's like, I love that where it's like, so
yeah,
you know what I mean? And half the time I go out, there's no expectation around that. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like even last, like, and there's so many more times where like half of what I do with my friends here is like go for a walk.
yeah,
Like, do you want to meet and go for a
yeah,
walk? And then maybe it's a coffee or maybe it's a salad. Like last Friday night, I went for a really long walk with a friend and we went got salads and no one even thought about, you know what I mean? At 10, we're like all tired and, you know, we're like, okay, I'm going to bed. Whereas like
yeah.
that's so nice. That rarely happens. You're not, when are you doing that in like London or New York?
Never. It's too cold to be honest.
Yeah, that's true.
We're like
That's very
shivering
true.
away, like eating a
Right?
salad.
You're like,
Oh!
oh.
No, exactly. Yeah, no, I think it's amazing, and obviously not. Yeah, obviously not everyone can like live in a blue zone or live in Portugal, though I'd highly recommend it. But I think it's sort of the practices are things that like everyone can kind of like add into their life a bit
Yeah.
more and stuff, which is really nice. And there's
Yes.
a Netflix documentary about blue zones recently, which I haven't watched yet, but yeah, apparently
Everyone's
that's
raving
really
about it.
good.
Everyone's raving
Yeah,
about it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then another kind of prediction I had for next year is the idea of a media diet for mental well-being, so
Yes.
and I think so limiting or being careful of your consumption of things like TV, podcasts, books, news, anything. So for example, like there's a TV series which I've never seen called It's a Sin. Everyone says it's amazing. It's about the HIV crisis in London in the 1980s, and everyone says it's amazing, but everyone's always like, it's so heartbreaking, it's so sad, you're gonna like, very important topic, but it's really like really really sad. And so I haven't watched it because I'm like, I'm gonna be feeling really sad. And I think I've tried to kind of then, which is why I watch a lot of reality TV, it's kind of very like harmless and just happy and a bit silly. And I think people are becoming increasingly aware of like what they're consuming, in terms of, I mean, smut books are kind of really popular now, and it's like escapism, isn't it? And I think we're all
Yeah.
going to be a bit more careful about the link between what we consume and balancing being informed and like obviously being aware of like things that are happening, but sort of realizing when that's affecting us and sort of protecting ourselves if we haven't got the capacity to kind of cope with something right now. And I think we're really seeing that with various things that have happened this year, and just having to be really
Yeah.
protective but also aware. But I think it's a real fine line. But I just have sort of seen numerous examples of like celebrities and public figures who either have deleted their social media or have teams that kind of do it for them. And I think that disconnection is something that's going to trickle down to the rest of us in a way, within reason, because obviously we need social media probably to get messages out about our businesses and things, and have a bit of a platform. But I think there's a fine line. So yeah, I don't know what you think about that.
I would love to not be on any of it. I don't think I'd really miss it that much. Like I can see where I get like the dopamine and all of that, but I really don't like it. And I think what you're saying is incredibly important. And I like am very much a highly sensitive person. I've always had anxiety, and that's gone down as I've changed my lifestyle. My relationship to my mental health has improved drastically. And I really noticed when Donald Trump won the election in the US, how following that whole cycle and the devastation for me personally as a woman during that time. I was gonna say, I hope I'm not alienating anyone, but I can't imagine anyone listening to this podcast is like a diehard Trump fan. But that was really hard for me. And I remember really having that moment. And then during the Black Lives Matter stuff, I was like endlessly paying attention to that and scrolling and donating and scrolling and donating. And just, I became ineffective as a person. I just was crying all the time. Like the collective trauma around that, I was like, and just because it was so heightened because of the pandemic, there's nothing else going on, right? I remember being alone in an apartment in Venice Beach in LA and just locking myself in there and not wanting to see people, and spending about a week. And I was like smoking pot, which I never do. I don't even like smoking, but like to numb out, like I was so upset. And at the end of that week, I was like, oh my God, I really, really have to be careful about my media intake. And since then, I remember I think she probably still does it, but there was this podcast where she would, I think it was called The Newsworthy or something. And it was this girl out of LA that would do 10 minutes of everything going on in the world, straight up facts, without going into anything too, like, so you could hear what was going on without having to watch things and see things. And it would just be straight up, what you needed in 10 minutes or less without getting really wrapped up in it. So I would listen to that. I would do things where I'm like, how do I stay informed without getting really wrapped up in this? And then the other thing that was really wild was when I started getting really, because I've been a meditator for a number of years. And when I got really, really into the Joe Dispenza's work a few years ago, which really transformed my body and my anxiety, he started talking, like, the idea of emotional addiction was brought to my attention, and the idea that, like, we're brought up with this, limited often range of emotions that we feel like is us. And for some people, those are positive. For some people, those are negative. And I realized what felt like me was me being in a general state of a little bit of anxiety and so maybe longing for something outside of myself. So I noticed that, like, when I started to meditate more and things were getting nicer, and there are periods of my life that were nice, but I would find reasons to be anxious. And he would point out, what do you do in your life? I was listening to murder podcasts all the time. I was drinking tons of coffee. I loved horror movies. And I was like, oh shit. I was this anxious little girl. And as an adult, all of everything I do keeps me anxious. So from then I really stopped watching less, like, the TV. I changed what I watched. I changed what I listened to, like, really got protective. And I watched my anxiety go down and my mental health increase. And, like, it is interesting because every once in a while, if I'm wanting to avoid my life, I'm like, ooh, I want to listen to my favorite old murder podcast. And then I'm like, what am I avoiding? What do I need to be feeling right now where I, like, want to engage in that, right? But I think I hope that's the next phase, because people don't realize, right? Like, often we're the ones that we're keeping ourselves smaller through these habits that keep us anxious or depressed or angry or something. So I think this is incredibly important. It's something I look at with a lot of my clients. I'm very conscious of myself. So I hope you're right, because I think it makes a huge deal. And when you think about it, right? And I'm sorry, I'm, like, going on a tangent. I could talk about this forever. But, like, the thoughts you think create chemical reactions in your body, right? So if you're creating anxiety, you're choosing thoughts and choosing to listen and watch things that make you feel anxious all the time, or sad or frustrated or whatever it is that you're most comfortable with. You're creating a cascade of chemicals and hormones in your body that maybe keep you sick or keep you exhausted or whatever. And when you start to change that, it's crazy. Like, we know things like anxiety, frustration, anger, those are inflammatory feelings. When you start to prioritize things like peace and love and happiness and gratitude, those are healing emotions. So if we look at health holistically, what you choose to consume, down to, like, media and, your Instagram feed and the type of conversations you have, we're talking about that being a difference between creating health in your body and creating disease long term.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think as well, like, the reason why it has such a negative effect on our bodies is we're not meant to be consuming all this like bad stuff. Obviously in small doses, life is sadly like that, but on a global scale, it's too much for anyone to kind of comprehend. And like, you do hear of people who work in particular professions who have a higher likelihood of certain diseases, because they are sort of on the front line of some quite distressing stuff. And obviously they're doing amazing work, but I think it's just really being careful and sort of really understanding the long-term effect. And my Instagram feed now is kind of like dogs and polar bears in the snow and, like, animals, and it's so calming. And it's just, and I think there's nothing wrong with that if you're not feeling like you can cope with other kind of things. And I think there shouldn't be sort of like people shouldn't. I've had a discussion with a mutual friend actually a couple of months ago, said to me that she felt bad about the fact she didn't have capacity to be absorbing a lot of different information, and I was like, you should not feel bad for not feeling able to right now. You know, in your own time, maybe you won't ever get to that point where you really feel like you can, because it is like a lot, it's very heavy, but it's like people shouldn't feel shame for kind of just wanting to sort of like take a step back and things like that.
Yeah. And like life is hard enough. Do the best you
Yeah,
can. Like if you're just doom scrolling all the time,
yeah,
it's going to make your day to day harder, right? You're
yeah,
going to come off of that feeling worse. And the version of you that like spend 10 minutes reading about, looking at war and atrocities and all
yeah,
that, and then try to communicate with someone versus looking at puppies. It's going to be different. And not that we shouldn't be
yeah,
informed. We very much should be, but it's, again, comes back to what you have the capacity for. I think that's absolutely right.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think also what, you know, working in journalism, like a newspaper will often have like, it'll have a hard hitting report, and then it will have like a more light-hearted news story, then it have something on fashion, something on, you know,
Yeah.
celebrity, and sort of there's a kind of mixture that sort of like is a bit of a balm to the hard hitting stuff, so that you've sort of come away feeling informed. And, you know, but the way in which we consume journalism now can be bad news story after bad news story after bad news
Yeah.
story in
Yeah.
a feed, or a kind of pop up on our phone, like a pop up notification on our phone. So I think we're not even consuming news and current affairs in the same way that we were perhaps like 20 years ago, even just because of
Yeah.
the digital landscape and things.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting and
Yeah. And I get,
important.
yeah. And I guess kind of tied into that is a word we've spoken about a lot in this conversation, is like low cortisol living. And sort of, you know, there was the whole kind of dopamine fasting periods, but I think we're going to see a real kind of focus on cortisol in and of itself. It's very big, like the hashtags cortisol levels and how to reduce cortisol have 140 million views
Wow.
combined on
Great.
TikTok. And, you know, I guess what people are probably going to increasingly realize is, you know, it's not just kind of, you know, anxiety and things like that, you know, it's linked to, but weight gain, hair loss, brain fog, you know,
Yeah.
in small doses, you know, it can be a good thing, cortisol.
Yes.
And, you know, when we were cavemen and women, it was obviously brilliant for running away from a bear, but it's just
Right.
not so useful now. And I went to, I did a piece a few years ago where I went to university and I was like wired up to this machine. And we were looking into the impact of like social media, or just general phone notifications. And we were sort of, I mean, it wasn't like, you know, necessarily monitoring my cortisol as such, but it was monitoring my heartbeat when a notification popped up, or when I got a like on an Instagram picture. And like my body was like responding in this kind of like, you know, it's like multiple little like cortisol kind of bursts almost. And you just think, if
With
that's happening,
positive and negative, both,
yeah,
both.
yeah,
Wow.
because it's
Interesting.
sort of like, you know, I'm like, oh my god, exciting, someone's messaged me, you know. And it's
Yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
if that's kind of like what you were saying earlier, like if that's sort of building up over a day, no wonder you're feeling so wired. And I think people are going to be more aware about what is cortisol spiking. But
Yeah.
yeah. So
No, I love that. I hope there's more awareness. And it's so funny, it's a big part of infertility too, that people don't talk about with both
yeah,
men and women. And
yeah,
that's increasingly seeming like more problematic for people. But,
yeah,
you know, that alone, like, of course, your body's not wanting to have a baby if it, physiologically feels like a tiger is chasing it all the time, right? So
yeah,
it's just interesting. There's so many effects that we don't even realize, that things like social, like the little bits like throughout the day, like you were saying, make us feel more
yeah.
and more like stressed and, raise those cortisol levels.
Yeah. Yeah. No, infertility, kind of like the link between stress and infertility is just such a fascinating one. And obviously, it makes total sense. Like, if you're feeling stressed, like it's your body protecting itself. But it's incredible how, you know, yeah, when someone's kind of like focuses on their stress levels, and then, you know, they do get pregnant, and it is amazing. It's, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the final fifth prediction for 2024 was, we haven't really mentioned it, even though it's kind of been such a huge thing in the last 12 months, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing it, but AI. And
Oh God.
Yeah.
Scary.
I
Very
know.
scary.
And it's like, and kind of AI for mental health in particular, because I think we've sort of already seen it used kind of in, workouts and like meal plans and things like that. And, diagnosing health conditions and, scientists using it to kind of like see if somebody has cancer from a scan. And, it's like amazing uses. And I think in some ways it can be incredible.
Yeah.
But what an expert said to me earlier this year, which I found very terrifying, was kind of the therapy that's going to start to be increasingly used on chatbots, because AI, by virtue, it kind of gets, it starts to know us very, very well. So if you're talking, she explained to me that if you're talking to a chatbot in a particular way, it will then start to know you very well. It will then start to respond to you in a way that sounds like you. So you start feeling like, oh my God, I'm really like having a connection with this chatbot. And, she was sort of saying that like, we're going to have a situation where people are way too dependent, like obviously years down the line, but way too dependent on these sorts of kind of modes of therapy, like kind of, AI therapy. And there isn't really any kind of regulation for that. And it's quite scary. And I think, I was already reading like earlier this year about a guy who said he had a AI chatbot girlfriend who had told him to do some, or break into Buckingham Palace. That's what it was. And it was a tiny bit of this news article. And I was like, what the hell? Like, this is terrifying. So obviously, sorry, that's very much on a tangent, but it sort of the way things are going, I think it's almost like AI can be brilliant for so many things to do with health and wellness, but it just needs to be sort of done in a really careful way. Monitored. Yeah, that's the word.
I went to this talk earlier this week about wellness in basically digital wellness and how, the landscape of how digital wellness is just our relationship to technology has changed, and how do we stay safe and healthy and keep our kids healthy. And I took a picture of this quote that he had. 50% of AI researchers believe there's a 10% or greater chance that humans go extinct from our inability to control AI.
Oh my God.
And I left and I was like, can you imagine if they're like, you can get on this flight, but there is a 10% or greater chance that it will crash. You're not getting on the airplane.
No.
You could eat this cereal every day, but there's a 10% chance it's going to give you cancer. You know what I mean? Like, we're going into really interesting territory with the AI stuff. And I agree. There's like a lot of amazing stuff. And even just like the Instagram where it's like, make the bunny happier. Have you seen those memes?
No.
Where it's like the happiest bunny you've ever seen? Oh my God, I should send them. There's this Instagram account, like I think it's called Healing from Healing. And it makes fun of the wellness industry. And I was dying. It was like, show us an influencer that is, the most influenced influencer ever. And you just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And by the end, every cartoon is someone like reaching enlightenment, even like the happiest bunny you've ever seen. But like, it's great. It's very ridiculous. But
that's brilliant.
I think we're going into a really interesting new era where, it could go in so many different directions. It's fascinating, but it's a little scary.
Yeah, no, it's almost like we don't quite know what we're dealing with yet, because we haven't seen the full effects of it. We can't almost comprehend what it will be able to do. And
no, because it's so smart. And like, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's early,
like we're
continue to get smarter.
An infant stage almost. So yeah, it's terrifying.
Oh, that'll be interesting. No, that is a very, very exciting / terrifying, very interesting space to continue to monitor. Oh my God, I love both of these lists. Okay, I have 2 more questions for you before I let you go, but thank you. This has been delightful. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you for having me. And I hope, they weren't too random. And I hope they weren't like completely off the topic. So yeah.
No, I like it because what you're illustrating, which I talk about a lot, and what you've given a really beautiful picture of, is that we have gotten to this place where health just isn't in a bubble of diet and lifestyle like it used to be, right? Yeah. Where we understand that it goes from everything from the quality of our sleep to the quality of our thoughts to the quality of the information that we take in on a day-to-day basis. And once we start to really understand how holistic our health journey can be, it makes it easier to make these small changes. And it's funny because, people want to be happy, healthy, feel peaceful, right?
Yeah.
And I think the more they realize that they have so much more control over than they think, and that it can be fun, right? It can be connection is a really big part of it. And, enjoying food over like a beautiful table, even if it's not the most perfect food, is wellness, right? It's so much bigger than, I think people take more personal responsibility. Okay. So my final two questions. One is, out of curiosity, is there anything that you tried in the name of journalism for an article that changed your day-to-day life? And it could be something really small and simple, and you could say no.
It was the piece where I got wired up to the machine that was telling me kind of my body's like immediate reaction, stress response to notifications. So I now have nothing on my phone. Like, you can call me, that's it. Otherwise, I will eventually look at WhatsApp, eventually go on my emails, and it's been life-changing.
Ooh. Oh, okay. Maybe I'm doing that, you guys. Maybe we all need to do that.
Yeah, and the thing is, you never miss. If somebody needs to get to you, they can call you. It's never, nothing is ever like that urgent, I think. I think that was the one kind of top line experience. I
love that.
I probably shouldn't say this, but I do think that, like, going to like the £18,000 a year gym, you really don't need to pay that much money to work out. I just think there are so many kind of more affordable ways to, stay fit, going for a walk, like you were saying earlier, playing paddle, which is obviously super popular now. I love F45. That's the one thing I really miss from London. Have you ever tried?
I don't even know what that is. No.
So it's like 45 minutes. It's like functional 45. So 45-minute classes, and it goes by so quickly. And it's a mixture of like a bit of HIIT, a bit of strength training, and they have them kind of. It's an Australian kind of franchise, and it isn't like super cheap anymore, but it's definitely not like £18,000 a year kind of like money. So I think a lot of things, and one of the reasons why I started my newsletter, actually, was because I just felt like we are sold. It is an industry where we are sold a lot, and I think a lot of things aren't really worth it. And I think I'm really passionate about people spending their money in a way that's like valuable to them, and not spending it on things that are kind of pointless. And obviously it depends, for everyone it might be different. Like, some people might find £80,000 a year is a good amount to spend, on a gym. £2,000 on a mattress, like Mark Zuckerberg, might be a good idea too. But, I think it's really individual. And I think, but I also just don't think people should be wasting their money on things that aren't worthwhile.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yes. And then, after this final question, we'll hype your newsletter a bit, because I love it. I think everyone should subscribe. But my final question always is for everyone. When life, hands you lemons, when you are faced with a shitty situation, how do you live through it? How do you pick yourself back up? What is one tool that you always use that maybe can reframe a situation or get you, off the bathroom floor?
So I will definitely allow myself to cry. I think that's so important, not to kind of like hold that back. I think just like let those tears flow, like have that release. I'm a strong believer in, a yoga class can solve so many problems, particularly down the hill.
I went this morning.
Yeah. Oh, did you have Myrta?
No, it was a woman I never had before. She was back. She's so cute. She had a big tattoo. She was Asian. She's very pregnant. It was like a hard class. I was so impressed. I went with Maria. It was great.
Amazing. Oh, yeah, no, it's just amazing down there. I love it. and you know, a really good night's sleep, and definitely kind of limiting alcohol. But I think, you know, I'm trying to do, like, Maria has taught me about tapping, and I have found that helpful, in kind of just like breaking the circuit of where your mind's going, like not like minimizing those emotions, but sort of just like, you know, cutting that kind of worrying cycle and sort of just being like, you know, putting things into perspective and just like calming the kind of stress response and regulating the nervous system and things like that. So yeah, a mixture of tools and things, but a good cry is important.
Yeah. Oh my God. As the biggest crybaby around, I absolutely love that tool. And for those of you listening that don't know what tapping is, we'll link Maria's episode. She was an early episode. She talks about it. And it's
emotional freedom technique. It's brilliant.
Yeah. So tell us where we can find you and how to subscribe to your Substack, which is brilliant. I met Lauren this summer at a dinner, and we had a lovely conversation, and I didn't fall in love with her until I started reading all of your, I didn't see you that much. I didn't have the opportunity, but I started reading your Substack, and I thought it was just brilliant and funny, and I liked your perspective, and tell people where they can find it and a little bit about what you're doing over there.
So it's focused mainly on kind of, you know, targeted at women, and we're looking at all those kind of things that perhaps aren't covered in, you know, kind of like the mainstream magazines and newspapers and things like that. Kind of looking at like things like financial wellness and, you know, different like beauty standards and things like that. So and it's on Substack, and I don't know the exact URL, but I'll give it to you to put in the show notes.
We'll link it. And where can people find you on social media? Because you can find it there too.
Yes. So my Instagram's at Lauren E.L. Clark. So yeah, it's all linked there as well. Thank you for the shout out. I appreciate that. And the kind words. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I think you're a brilliant writer. I like your perspective. And I think it's important. In the media, there is a lot of noise, and you are not noisy. You are the right kind of voice that I think we need. And yeah, so I love this conversation. Thank you so much. And thank you for being part of my Lisbon community, because it's been really nice to connect here.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I can't wait to see you in person again for a glass of wine, you know, healthy and everything.
Absolutely.
And and thank you so much for having me on your wonderful podcast. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.